So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Konan, so let's start the series. He gazed down at Sasuke's comatose form as a stream of ideas filled his head, erasing the majority of the pain that would have otherwise plagued his body. He could have said that Sasuke was just under the effects of the cursed heaven seal, that he didn't believe it, and that it was all a terrible dream. However, did he really need to put that Chidori through his chest? Was the Uchiha altered by the seal, or did it only make his actual character stand out more? Was this his true identity? Was there no hope for Sasuke? What if he had said something? What made Sasuke different from him? He had seen what it was like to be alone, and he knew it all too well. The village had disregarded him, ostracized him, and even sneered at him with the kind of stares only the coldest monsters deserved. What gave Sasuke the authority to turn against their group and the village? He was aware of what it felt like to be without family. Unlike Sasuke, he had never had a family. The difference might have been that Sasuke had lost the ones he loved the most and had to watch his family being killed by his own brother. To make matters worse, everyone was expecting him to save the day, as if he were the next Minato Namikaze. It is ironic that the blonde closed his eyes and mumbled, "Huh, I guess things never go the way you wished," as he tried to stop the tears from falling. Why am I not able to get a fair chance this one time? He turned around abruptly and felt a chakra approaching. It wasn't very big, but he could feel their presence. Kakashi-sensei, what will he say, you pitiful brat? When he enters and sees you standing over your injured buddy, he will accuse you of killing him and call you a monster like the others. Shut up, Kyuubi. When you assaulted Konoha, you pulled me into this. The Kyuubi scoffed and simply sighed loudly before turning away. After this, do you really think they'll respect you? All of a sudden, you bring home the last Uchiha. Battered to death? Don't even get your hopes up about that pink-haired girl. She'll just go back to her beloved old Sasuke-kun. You're a pathetic, lonely brat with only me by your side. They'll go back to calling you a monster, a simple demon, and a blight to the land. Naruto scowled and shook his head while shielding his eyes. Baka, you're lying. Oba-chan wouldn't allow it to occur, and Ero-sennin and Irika-sensei will both assist me. The blonde's only response as he concluded his sentence was a callous laugh from the Nine Tails. If you want to be crushed, then so be it, kid, but don't expect any help when you come to me for survival in the community. The enormous fox withdrew back into its cage after saying those final words, perhaps convincing the idiot who was doubting the village that he was in a vulnerable state at the moment. Naruto looked at the ground and sighed, a big lump forming in his throat. He had never been one to question the village, but he had to acknowledge in his heart that the Kyuubi was partially correct. Konoha loved Sasuke far more than they did. What if the Kyuubi had been telling him the truth? Did he not give up on the Uchiha solely to make him return? Hadn't Kakashi-sensei stated that people who desert their companions for the sake of the mission are worse than scum? What if Sasuke said he had assaulted him without alerting the Uchiha or offering them an opportunity to voluntarily return? The blonde could already see that he would once more be shunned and used as a scapegoat by the tribe. All of his hard work and training would be for nothing if he made one mistake. No, he wouldn't permit it, and he couldn't permit that. After inhaling deeply, Uzumaki raised his hands and gradually undid the Hitayate before setting the band beside Sasuke. I can't allow people to know that I'm a villager. I'm no longer a shinobi for Konoha. I'm just a fool who believed he could make the world a better place. The young genin turned around and started running in the direction of the eastern boundary. Kumo and Iwa were out of the question because of their tense relations with Konoha, and Kirigakure was completely out of the question because he could still clearly recall what they had made Zabuza commit for his exams. He knew that heading towards Wave Country was a bad idea because he was well known for the mission against Zabuza, and Tsunagakure was allied with Konoha, so he would be a giveaway there. Since it's my only choice at the moment, I suppose I'll just travel in the hopes of finding a place to stay or a means to train. He stopped and turned around just in time to see that he was a few miles from the valley. He sensed that Kakashi's chakra had abruptly stopped, which was a clear indication that he must have arrived at the Uchiha. But he would be too preoccupied with caring for him to pursue him. Perhaps it wouldn't be so hard to get out. As she gazed at his deteriorating physique, she saw that Nagato, who had previously been strong and slender, was now lying beside Konan on his deathbed. He coughed furiously, sending blood splattering forth, and Konan could only close her eyes tightly in an attempt to ignore the scene, but to no use. Nagato murmured, "There's no use in running from the truth, Konan." His voice faint and almost discernible due to his feeble state. She had already been compelled to see it when Yahiko, her childhood friend and crush, voluntarily took his own life for them. A scene that plagued her dreams. Nagato-san, as he went on, his words grew increasingly strained. "Konan, I lived my every waking breath to see this world one day see true peace, a day in which nobody would have to see or witness the corruption of the shinobi world," he said. Even though she wasn't a qualified medical professional, she could tell that it would only be a few minutes at most before death would take him. Armed with this information, Konan was at a loss for what to do and only nodded silently as a feeling of dread grew in her gut. Why did the people she loved experience this? Why did the first deaths occur among those who sought peace? Why did those who aimed to inflict suffering end up living long lives? However, Nagato interrupted her before she could finish her idea, first with a little smile and then with an increasing string of coughs. He wheezed, his hands starting to go numb, as he took one final look at his old comrade. "You need to find the true child of prophecy," he said, "because I know that Jiraiya-sensei was searching for him before he left us. Find him and make our dreams come true." Konan muttered to herself, "Nanagato," and cursed her life. "You are the god of shinobi and are meant to be the world's savior, hence you cannot die, Nagato." Unfortunately, Nagato closed his tired eyes and fell into a comfortable, peaceful sleep before he could hear her pronounce his name. The final remnant of Konan's early years had recently died. Nanagato, Nagato, Nagato. He had escaped Konoha jurisdiction after the sun had already risen and the daylight had hit him square in the eyes when he woke up feeling groggy. However, that was not his primary concern at the moment. Rather, it was the cold and dampness that came from his clothes, which were now torn and worn. If he remained in this state for a few more nights without changing his clothes or taking a shower, he would either get sick or contract pneumonia, which no amount of Kyuubi's chakra could cure. Where to go from where he was his second, but ultimately more significant concern. He didn't know many communities outside of Sunagakure, which eliminated a lot of possibilities. "Even while I love watching your inner turmoil, brat, I would hate for us to perish because you couldn't find a good location to sleep." As much as he hated to admit it, the fox was right when he said that if he wanted to live, he would need to find a place to stay for a while. At this point, his only option was to find any neighboring towns, perhaps rent a room, and take food covertly. "You are aware of the irony. Well, now, youngster, what are you babbling about? After leaving the orphanage, I ended up stranded in a dilapidated house that no one wanted. I now had nowhere to live and no one to support me. You sound like a dying idiot." He ought to have realized the fox wouldn't give a damn. Tsunade reviewed the report that Shikamura had submitted not long ago, much to her own alarm. It had, however, gone much better than she had anticipated. Even though many genin had been hurt, Niji had been returned and had multiple bone fractures, while Chuji was hospitalized due to severe chakra exhaustion, a side effect of the Akamichi pills. Even Akamaru was on the verge of death, but the doctors assured him that he would survive, while Kiba, who was luckier, was only there for a screening and a few days. However, she had noted that there was no information available about Naruto's health or Sasuke's location, so she could only presume that Kakashi had picked them up when the squad returned. "Hokage-sama, you called?" Kakashi inquired, preparing to break the bad news to her. She said in a cool, collected tone, "Yes, Kakashi, I noticed that Shikamaru didn't report anything on Naruto and Sasuke even though I know he wasn't there, so I understand him not knowing, but what's the Baka's condition, Kakashi? Shikamaru stated that you went ahead to retrieve them. Knowing Naruto, he was out and about parading about how he had returned with the Uchiha." The seasoned Konoha Jonin shook his head uneasily and perspired a little. He was well aware that his next remarks would cause chaos. He replied he had got away, he's a missing shinobi, but Tsunade just stared at him silently. It was startling since he had anticipated the Hokage to suddenly become enraged or to throw at least a few vicious blows. He needed the time to find Naruto, so he hoped that if he was lucky, he would be released from the hook. He had made a pledge to his own sensei that he would never let anyone down as long as he was alive. He was startled out of his reverie as he felt a terrible hand seize his neck and thrust him forward directly into the face of a scowling Tsunade. "You let him escape? Hatake, you moron. Naruto is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, and for all we know, he could be dead. To have any idea what the consequences would be." She yelled. The Jonin cursed himself as he suddenly realized what was happening. The Senju was right. If Jiraiya was right about the Akatsuki, the young blonde would always be in serious danger because Naruto would not be able to compete with even a true veteran shinobi if he were captured or attacked. "I failed once more, Minato-sensei. Why am I so oblivious to these things? Obito, Rin, you, and now your only child. Why am I so worthless?" She didn't want one of her best shinobi to suffer from despair. So Tsunade gradually observed his facial expressions as they changed from pain to confusion and back to pain. Perhaps he was taking the situation too hard. She sighed, shook her head, and fought back a few tears because there was nothing else she could do. She then hoped Naruto was okay. As he ran at his fastest pace toward the trees, he felt the strain on his legs start to set in. He hadn't anticipated the store to have shinobi guards, much less rookie Jonin, so he was taken by surprise. He leaped onto a branch and felt the food and drinks in his pack sway, which knocked him slightly off balance as he regained his momentum. With every second that went by, he could already hear the voices right behind him getting closer. Their boss yelled angrily, "You idiots! How could a simple child get away from your supervision? He was only a teenager." As the group hesitated because of the reprimands they were receiving, Naruto just continued to run forward, exploiting their circumstances. He was unaware that a figure had landed in front of him and knocked him down before he could recognize them. As Naruto set down the groceries, the shinobi grinned and said, Well, a young orphan stealing food. You know, kid. Here in the nation's borders, we don't take kindly to thieves. Maybe you need a lesson. Well, I'll have to battle him now. You let me kill him and we could make it simple. No, I'm capable of managing my own issues." Naruto sighed and slipped into a defensive stance. He was likely heading toward his own demise, but he preferred to deal with it directly rather than have the Kyuubi make amends for everything he had done. After finishing Nagato's covert burial just a few days earlier, Konan had not known what to do because Nagato had only left a vague and rather broad order to find the Child of Peace. In reality, the only thing she had thought about doing was looking for Jiraiya because he had been the first to find Nagato. If anyone knew what to do, he would have a general idea of what to do, and since she wasn't familiar with prophecies, she was alone. Okay, so first I need to get my thoughts straight. Where would Jiraiya be? He was a recluse, so I know he wouldn't stay in one spot for very long, which only makes me wonder more. He was a Konoha shinobi. Their Hokage should know, if anything. Now, how can we reach the Hokage? A man shouted, "Hey, get the kid. Come on, hurry up," from a distance. Konan initially ignored it, but as she saw the men pursuing a young, blonde teen wearing a hideous orange jumpsuit, she halted. What? they're chasing him, perhaps. Just a common thief, although why in the world he would wear that suit is beyond me. Who would even wear orange dash? Konan paused as she registered her own words and felt a tiny wire in her brain click. Blonde teenager, penchant for trouble, orange jumpsuit, the Kyubi Jinchuriki, she exclaimed as she ran toward the audience. I cannot let them hurt the boy. As they started to form up, the three Jonin breathed a little. The youngest Jonin, who was struggling to catch his breath, gasped, Captain, this kid, he isn't normal. Despite his reputation for being oblivious, Naruto could tell the man wasn't trained for physically demanding missions, which meant he either preferred medical jutsu or genjutsu, which was his biggest pain. However, he assumed he was probably a medic ninja and not combat trained because he had not yet used a single attack. Well, youngster, you're really becoming clever. Surprised that even the Kyubi had given him praise, Naruto grinned and scratched his head sheepishly. Sadly, the attacking shinobi mistaken that identical smile for a fake one, which they actually didn't like. With brown hair and a little disheveled beard, the tallest of the Jonin growled, so that insolent child assumes that because her avoided a beating thus far, he can toy with us. Kyuten, Kaze Shuriken no Jutsu. With a moan, Naruto leaped backwards as 7 tiny air shurikens started to fly in his direction. He landed on a neighboring branch as the wind sank deeply into the ground he had been standing on. Even with his endurance, he was starting to lose energy from repeatedly evading, so he wouldn't last much longer. However, the blonde kid was too distracted to detect the Jonin enemy in time. The seasoned shinobi grinned as one of his colleagues landed behind Naruto, surprising the young genin. Hozenka no jutsu, Katan said. Oh no, that jutsu won't be used again. Sasuke has already overrated it. As the flames approached, Naruto felt the searing pain as his skin seemed to melt from the heat. He only looked behind him in the hopes of avoiding the oncoming fire, but all he could do was watch helplessly. You run, blast it. Get up. I'm not going to die. I will not surrender to a mere mortal. In a futile attempt to save the remaining life in his host, the Kyubi snarled and started beating on the seal in its cage. He would perish right then and there, in the stomach of a helpless infant. Konan would have called herself a fool for leading the fight if it had happened a few days earlier, but looking back, she was certain that saving the Kyubi Jinchuriki was a better course of action than letting it die because she was certain that the bijou inside would only be released. Without Nagato and the Chibaku Tensei, there wouldn't be much chance of stopping the monster. What am I going to do? I can sense the enemy's chakra levels, and even if they are not very skilled, they are all Jonin. Should I attack? When Konan saw the young blonde being struck by a Katan jutsu, her entire world seemed to stop, and then a sudden fuse was ignited inside her skull. He was young, each of them was attacking a designated adversary in turn. Had she turned into this with Akatsuki? One of the Jonin chuckled hysterically, his eyes widening from the derisive tone. You insolent, incompetent brat. Did you really think you stood a chance against us? She had no idea what it was or why, but Konan sensed a single crack appear on the long-wearing mask of indifference. Had the Akatsuki turned into this? Had they transformed into a bunch of heedless criminals out to alter the world via misery, rather than a symbol of hope and change against oppression? How had they fared? What caused them to drop so low? Who was at fault? She frowned at herself and shook her head, but she was able to move quickly enough to grab one of the men's wrists as he tried to stab the Jinchuriki. Leave the boy alone, she said, her voice emotionless once more. She looked back and exhaled when she saw the unconscious teenager breathing heavily but at a somewhat safe rate. The man tried to move his wrist firmly, but she would not even loosen her hold. You should learn how to respect your superiors, lady, he replied. What on earth is this woman composed of? Those who inflict violence on others, disregarding their suffering and without a purpose, will suffer, she muttered as she leaped to her feet and gave the man a drop kick to the chest. But before his teammates could respond, Konan silently grabbed the tree trunk next to her and raced through her hand signals. One of the Jonin exclaimed, what did she do, Captain?" before he stopped. The elder Jonin glared, "Shut up, boy," as he looked around his approximate vicinity. From their feet to the foot of the tree they were standing on, hundreds of explosive tags encircled them. If one thing happened, everyone would be blasted to bits. "You whore," the tags burst after those last words. Although it had been true that she had never visited Konoha, Konan turned around and picked up the boy before noticing his strikingly similar facial features to those of Namikaze Minato. She was undoubtedly familiar with the yellow flash from word of mouth and stories about how he had destroyed half of Iwa's army on his own and how he was the only shinobi in history to have a flee-on-sight order. Perhaps he had no, Minato never had children, or Konoha would have been boasting about it. She sighed as she understood that she couldn't leave the child alone in any case. She didn't freeze in astonishment until she heard a rough voice speak, a shiver of terror running up her back. She turned to see 5 hidden Rain Umbu looking at her, and she cursed her luck. "Well, if it isn't Konan, fancy meeting you here. I always wanted to avenge Lord Hanzo after you, and that freak kicked us all out of aim," the mysterious voice said. These days, she just looked to be enjoying herself the most. The man kept laughing, enjoying the fact that he had observed Nagato and Yahiko were not there. Although he was aware that he would never be able to compete with either of them, he understood that Konan was a different story, especially now that there were no more damn meddlings. "What a pleasant surprise, Takumo," she said with clenched teeth, fuming as the man merely shrugged nonchalantly. He smiled and licked his lips sadistically, saying, "Enough of the pleasantries, Konan-chan, how about we dance? I'd hate to think what my men would do to you if they thought you were alone." Konan shuddered, realizing that he was one of the few men who could frighten her and that he now had Umbu to assist him. To her astonishment, though, the Umbu just waited there when Takumo approached her. "I wanted to kill you on my own, but first I'll beat you to a bloody mess, then I'll make sure I have you screaming my name, you whore," he said. She instinctively assumed a protective posture before gulping in fear. At all costs, she had to get to the boy. The kunoichi was taken by surprise as Takumo suddenly appeared in front of her and slashed his kunai upward. But Konan stopped him by bringing her own kunai straight into his. "Oh no. With that one move, he almost got me. I must concentrate." Takumo instinctively reacted by throwing a pair of shuriken after Konan dropped to the ground and executed a backflip, landing a solid and painful kick to the man's chin. The man was stunned backwards and grunted as a strong sting shook his mind. Without pausing for a second, Takumo ran through the hand signs. Tajukage Bunshin Shuriken no Jutsu. Before Konan found herself confronted by a barrage of metal weapons raining down on her, the 2 shurikens swiftly doubled, then repeated the process. She crossed her arms in front of her face, helplessly bracing herself as they dug into her arms and skin. Squalling, she bit back any desperation as blood trails ran down her arms and body. However, the pain quickly subsided when one of Takumo's fists struck her stomach, causing her to double over and collide with his knee as it struck her face. He didn't miss an opportunity, so he grabbed her by the hair and threw her against a tree. He then kicked her repeatedly with chakra to weaken her. With every blow she felt, Konan gasped and coughed up a little blood. He was still as strong and even quicker as before. Holding her by the throat, Takumo smirked with a smug sense of justification and tore the paper flower from her hair. He then slid her up against a nearby tree and simply laughed softly but joyfully as the woman started to gasp for air. He relished seeing her go through the same complete despair that he had experienced when that damned Nagato destroyed their army. "What's the matter, whore? Don't know how to gag? Didn't little Yahiko teach you? Or perhaps Nagato? Or did you take them both at once?" She began to cry since she had little chance of surviving with her dignity intact. Her only thought was that she had to survive because she could not afford to break the promise she had previously given to Yahiko and Nagato. If she passed away, she had no idea what this sadistic world would do as a result of its own depravity. Wait. The kid. Taikubi Jinchuriki, where are you? She prayed that Takumo was gone before realizing he would have been long gone. She grinned weakly as she felt her life leave her, thinking that at least he had escaped. She gasped one last time as she watched the world turn black, but not before spotting a silhouette and yelling Rasengan as a blue chakra orb struck Takumo squarely in the abdomen. Who, she muttered humbly before passing out. The orange-clad genin was flying into the forest when he crashed into a tree trunk. Takumo clutched his body and felt his gut being torn from the inside. He knew he only had a few minutes left, but he would be damned if he let the midget live for it. You little jerk. You'll perish for it, he yelled, then blinked as the youngster simply stood in front of him, his head lowered so low that his bangs obscured his eyes. He whispered, "You tried to hurt a woman who had done nothing to you. That was a disgusting thing to do," which made the man chuckle. Yes. Kid, what about it? It was inevitable for her. Those who are weak in spirit, enough to bring danger to those beneath them, for the mere pleasure of it deserve to be cast to the pits of their nightmares. For what reason? Does that sound familiar? What are you talking about so much? I'm a shinobi and I'm bound by the morality of my own convictions. I'll bring you to justice, old man. I won't show you any mercy, but I will take everything that is corrupt and burn it, he shouted. And no, don't say that cocky thing again. This child is even worse than that Nagato. Retreat. Everyone. Naruto shot the shinobi in the chest with a short black rod before penetrating the renegade aim, so Takumo never even had a chance. He muttered to himself, "Give them nothing, but take from them everything." The blonde shook his head, looking at the unconscious woman, feeling a little lightheaded. What occurred? I recall fleeing, but then nothing happened. As he cautiously approached Konan and lifted her up bridal style, he felt his mind go blank when he saw the woman again. I should get her out of here. There's no telling who could be coming back with reinforcements. As he knelt down and peered through the little peephole on the wooden fence which went into the women's hot springs, Jiraiya laughed heartily. He muttered softly, "Oh yeah, ladies, that's what Daddy likes." If only Tsunade Haim would do that before sensing a menacing presence close by. Why me not now? He felt a familiar deadly purpose permeate the air, and he immediately froze. If only I would do what, Jiraiya? He glanced back at the female voice, realizing that he was about to die, only to have his worries confirmed when a soft but steely fist struck his face, sending him flying into the town square a few blocks away. For Tsunade to publicly beat him in the women's spa, something had to have gone horribly wrong, and he believed it was related to the fact that he hadn't seen Naruto. Gorgeous. She was shocked to discover herself wrapped in a blanket when she gently opened her eyes, fearing that Takumo would torture her while she was nude. She instantly recalled the lad using Rasengan on Takumo. How did he know the jutsu? Was he acquainted with Jiraiya-sensei? As soon as a splitting headache struck, she forgot those questions. What the hell? She moaned, gripping her head. She assumed it was from the altercation. Calm down, you just need to sleep, a gentle voice whispered. She turned to see the same youngster she was attempting to save, and she screamed as she let go of the blanket. He appeared to be a blonde Yahiko Jr., and those eyes were the Rinnegan. Before Naruto could catch her, she leaped to her feet and fell face first. She glanced at him in confusion and said, "Be careful, Konan. Try not to hurt yourself." How did he know her name? "I apologize," she said, mentally slapping herself. You find the successor of Nagato and Yahiko, and your first impression is a stuttering young girl. Yes, it's a little unsettling, isn't it? Naruto chuckled uneasily, blushing as she recalled how carelessly Yahiko had laughed. Why did she have to be such a bitch, Nagato? Well, so what's your name? She inquired, and he sighed as he leaned back. Why did former Leaf Nin Naruto Uzumaki leave? To avoid the fear and hatred? He had the same life as her and the others, so she stared at him for a while. Perhaps he was the prophecy child Nagato had told her about and he could bring about world peace. Nothing, just wondering, she said as she slowly got to her feet and leaned against a wall. He held her arm and kept her upright, and she smiled softly. He looked a lot like Yahiko when he was younger. She gasped when she realized that her paper flower was gone, and she clutched her hair frantically. Naruto took out a paper rose from his pack, which was less than ideal than the original, but still better than most people could have made. He apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, but I couldn't save the real one. It was completely crushed, but I brought it anyway." She smiled at him, and even though she was bruised and beaten, he still put her ahead of him. This was unquestionably the chosen child. She took his flower gently and placed it on the top left side of her head, then the original one on the top right. She focused her chakra and felt them harden through the paper jutsu. She stared at his eyes for a while before walking past him to the campfire he had lit. Based on the dark skies, it was probably midnight by now. She glanced at him again, noting his facial features. His eyes were soft, even with the Rinnegan, and they looked like a sea of light purple, as if she could lose herself in them and not even cared. "What are you contemplating?" she inquired, observing his perplexed and hurt expression. She had seen that face previously. He simply shook his head. He said, "It's nothing, don't worry," and she saw the lie right away. If she was right in thinking he was the one, but she had to hide him. With Pain gone and Nagato gone, Akatsuki would soon be in a civil war over control, which could give her enough time to flee with Naruto. Yes, that would be good. She could study the Rinnegan and train Naruto enough to fend off an Akatsuki member, but Itachi and Kisame were still below her. She began, "I was an orphan growing up." He looked up and she saw a tear in his eye right away. He was the one, and all he needed to do was get stronger, and he would lead everyone to peace. She would follow him everywhere he went, just like Yahiko and Nagato. He failed the very man he saw as a son, the boy who was like his own grandson and godson, and a tear ran down his eye. Tsunade watched him with sadness, and although she detested seeing him as a pervert, she would rather see him staring at girls than see him depressed. She occasionally wondered if things would have turned out differently if she had accepted his first proposal. There are a lot of what-ifs. Perhaps they would have gotten married and had children. Perhaps they could have stayed and saved Sarutobi-sensei. Perhaps they could have saved Orochimaru before he defected. She stared at him and held his hand. He glanced up and gave her a feeble smile. She returned the gesture. "Hey, old man, is that date still available?" Sakura sighed joyfully as she stared attentively at Sasuke, who still had soft features. She knew Naruto wouldn't break his word, but now that she thought about it, she hadn't seen him since he made the vow to her. Perhaps Kakashi-sensei knew. A female voice said, "Sakura," and she turned to find Ino holding a bouquet. "Ino, are Sasuke's roses for him?" she inquired, and soon after, she felt jealous. To her astonishment, Ino shook her head no. Sakura grinned and said, "No, they're for Chuji. Shikamaru is out with that Temari girl from Suna." Ino suddenly screamed, "They could be friends again." "Is it true, Sakura?" she inquired, and Sakura gave her a perplexed expression. "What is true?" With a surprised expression, "Ino, why you're not sure?" She stumbled, Sakura shook her head, and Ino sighed deeply before pausing for a while. "Naruto is missing. He fled following the altercation with Sasuke." Sakura finally gasped and backed up a few unsteady steps. "And no, never would Naruto run. He is overly devoted to this village. He assured me that we would once more be a complete team. Sasuke, him, and me. The three of us." She almost yelled, and Ino's eyes widened. "That's it. Sasuke, you and him." Sakura nodded feebly. noticing Naruto's phony smile as he made the vow. He probably knew you wouldn't love him, so he thought he'd just be a third wheel and get in your way. He just wanted you to be happy, she said, wondering why she didn't speak out. He would have been here, playing around and making jokes about being Hokage if she had simply opened her lips and said, I want you and Sasuke both back as a team. However, she chose to keep her mouth shut. And now she lost the support system for the house she had always desired. What if the house collapsed? Where was she getting support? If Sasuke departed, where would Naruto be? When she got into danger, who would come to her rescue? She won her heart back, but at the expense of her best friend. As she stood beneath the waterfall, Konan washed her body slowly. She hadn't taken a shower in days, and it felt great. Hey, even high-ranking criminal women have their standards. She was about to leave when a yellow blur smashed into the water and pulled back up. She looked at the boy, who had a body similar to Yahiko's. It was thin, but you could see the potential for muscle. It was clear that he didn't eat healthily, or he would be full from hate and fear. Those words. The village probably hated him, and he was afraid of them. When she opened her eyes, she saw Naruto staring at her before he turned around and looked into her eyes. They would be the first thing on her list of judgments. I didn't mean to stare, Gomen Ko-chan. He quickly apologized, and she giggled softly. Most guys would have just stared at him, but she knew he had killed Takumo. She didn't regret his death, but she did regret Naruto killing his innocence with blood that didn't even deserve his attention, and Takumo didn't deserve to be around Naruto-sama. However, simply being present was insufficient. In front of him, he had to criticize her. Hold on, did she say Sama? Oh well, he ought to be aware of those eyes. Kaya-ya. She whirled around in panic as he screamed. Naruto-sama. She stopped when she noticed that he was gazing at the lake. And my eyes, he yelled. He must not be aware of the eyes, she thought. She approached him despite the fact that she was fully nude and that the water only covered her waist. Naruto-sama, those are the Rinnegan eyes, he said, turning to face her before blushing and turning away again. She grinned at his naivete. Naruto-sama, it's okay. I trust you to see me like this, she said, looking at him curiously as he made a face. I've already seen you staring, and the fact that you try to resist is amazing in itself, she said. Naruto-sama, what is it? This boy was undoubtedly the child of prophecy. He explained in disgust, I don't like perverts. I mean, Ero-sennin was one thing, but anyone else, that's just wrong. She smiled brightly at him, kind, and grew up in poverty and pain but maintained his innocence. He was also more mature than most men 3 times his age. And why do you refer to me as Sama? He inquired, and she groaned, it's going to be a long story. Every day, Kakashi faced the battle monument to explain his actions and his current state of mind. Obito, Rin, Sensei, I apologize for failing you all once more. I allowed my student to fall into Orochimaru's hands, and I allowed the person I vowed to protect to flee in terror from the United States, the very people who ought to have hailed him as a hero. Are we the good guys or the bad guys? Do we despise Orochimaru because he is a villain? Or is it that he is more malevolent than we are? I wish I had half of your wisdom, Sensei. Please impart it to me. After standing for a few more hours, he became interested in 2 voices. Kakashi shook his head when a pink-haired girl said, Please, Sasuke. Just one. That's all. Just one. She didn't notice anyone else but Sasuke even with Naruto gone. But then he heard something else. All right, you win. Sasuke is giving up. The next sentence, however, seized them and tore them apart while shouting, Didn't he see that coming? Ha bitch! If that got his attention. He smiled warmly at her, which made Kakashi smile as well. Let's bring Naruto back, please, please. I you us a team again. Not you or me or Naruto. Us, all 3 of us, please, please, they said, looking at her in amazement. They all perspired as they said, "Yeah, we'll bring the idiot back. I owe him an ass-kicking of a lifetime." They continued to be rivals, and Kakashi approached them to make sure they noticed him. Sasuke grinned as he said, "And count me in too. I owe him far too much explaining." "Well, displaying feelings at last, huh? Are you going to reveal your face to us next?" Sakura and Sasuke stayed motionless as Kakashi smiled and quickly removed his mask so that only they could see it. They both stammered, "SOW wow," and they had to thank Naruto for that. Now that they had something he didn't, they would love to torture him with that. These eyes were the original sage of the six paths, is that correct? And I possess them, ergo I am a descendant of him? Konan said, nodding. He was handling it quite well, he wasn't freaked out or overconfident. You mentioned losing Pain, also known as Nagato, and your first love, Yahiko, correct? She gave a sorrowful nod. Then call me Pain. I swear to uphold Nagato's dream and to exact revenge on Yahiko and Kochan. That's a lifetime pledge. He yelled, she said, grinning broadly. She hadn't felt this joyful since Jiraiya sensei had rescued her, Yahiko, and Nagato from Amigakure. "So, Kochan, what do we do now?" he asked her while focusing on her face. At last, he managed to glance away from her and see her face. "Gifts," she murmured. "You can call me Konan. I haven't done anything to merit your moniker, as I've already told you, Naruto, Lord Pain," she said. He smiled. "If you refuse to take it as a gift, I will designate you as my personal bodyguard and bestow the title of Kochan upon you." She sighed once more, but he persisted despite having her in a tight spot. She wouldn't dare defy his orders even if she wanted to because he was too crucial to the future of this repulsive and corrupt world. She would train and protect him, kill anyone who dared to challenge his divine reign, and punish those who didn't bow to his greatness for their impudence. They would experience the wrath of a true shinobi, not a cheap counterpart. Is this safe, Pain-sama? Konan nodded when asked, still not quite convinced of his strategy. "Yes, Kochan, it's safe. I wouldn't put us in unnecessary danger unless it was absolutely necessary. However, be prepared to fight if Akatsuki spies attack." She nodded and kept a hand close to her kunai as they jumped from branch to branch. He had clearly improved with his training. He was better at close-range fighting than Nagato, but he had also learned the fundamentals of Nagato's Tensei jutsus and the Rinnegan and successfully incorporated them into his own jutsu. If he continued at this pace, he could overtake both Nagato and Yahiko. She gave him another look. He had a deathly serious expression on his face as they drew close to the rain village. "Pain-sama, is there a problem?" she inquired, and he shook his head. "No, Kochan, everything's fine. I'm just thinking about meeting Salamander Hanzo, the very man that defeated the 3 Sannin in their youth and the one that caused you pain and suffering," he replied in a low tone. She smiled. He always put her wants and needs before his own. During his training, he had even taken her out to eat when she stated she was bored. It was interesting to watch people's face as a 12-year-old boy with 3 industrial bar piercing his nose and 2 snakebite piercings on his lower lip took a girl who was roughly 20 on a date. Some looked awed by him dating an older girl and congratulated him. Mostly only the perverts did that, or they'd look disgusted at her and ignored her. At any rate, nobody actually said anything about her. Pain's viciousness towards any who insulted Konan had become well known in the smaller countries, but he remained popular. He was the one ridding them of bandits and common criminals, and to them that was enough, she supposed. Nobody ever complained about him placing his judgment upon those who caused intentional pain and suffering upon others thanks to it. The violence level had gone down by almost 70%. It was almost rare to witness a fight between civilians. He nodded and made a quick question, but she reassured him, "Don't worry, Pain-sama. I think you can defeat him. No one has ever escaped your eternal judgment. That worthless fool will either bow before you or fall before you." Konan, you mentioned that the Rinnegan could resurrect the dead while preserving their free will, correct? Konan gave a nod. Indeed, Pain-sama. Why? Have you at last discovered ninjas deserving of your strength? She inquired inquisitively, and he laughed. I can't believe I let it get away with it. His genuine peace and the fact that no one would stand in front of him made him smile broadly. However, who could possibly be worth the hassle, Pain-sama? He smiled even more broadly as she said it was difficult to think of anyone pure enough or powerful enough to deserve that power. The 4 Hokages? He grinned, and she exclaimed, how could I never have thought of that? The Shodaime was the founder of Konoha and the only man to control the Bija besides Uchiha Madara. The Nidaime was regarded as the greatest military genius of his time and a master of Suijutsu. He could draw flood from even the driest places. The Sandaime Sarutobi was known as the god of all shinobi. No one could compare to him in his youth, and wisdom beyond his years only made him more deadly. Lastly, Yondaime Namikaze, the yellow flash of Konoha, was the man who, with the Kyuubi sealed and 1,000 IWA shinobi destroyed by himself, and even Akatsuki would bow down in fear. Naruto-sama. Then we ought to head to Fire Nation. Without you wasting chakra on him, Hanzo would collapse to his knees with the 4 Kages. She chuckled, you be god of the shinobi with 4 Kages and Hanzo's army behind you. He hesitated, she's right, and he could pay her a visit while he was in Konoha. Her pink hair flying behind her, she dashed for Konoha's gates. Kakashi-sensei! Kakashi-sensei! 2 renegade nin have been discovered near our boundaries. When she shouted, Jiraiya and Kakashi got to their feet and grinned. He calmly responded, Sakura, they're just rogue nin. Umbu will pick them apart. She gave a furious shake of her head. No, no, no. He wore the Shodaime's pendant necklace and had long, disheveled blonde hair with whiskers on his cheeks, according to one of their descriptions. They widened their eyes as she yelled, Naruto! They let out a gasp. She nodded. He was accompanied by a gal. She had blue hair and paper flowers in her hair. Konan, Jiraiya's eyes almost burst out of their sockets. Where was he going? He yelled, startling Sakura and Kakashi. She automatically said, towards Amigakure. The spy who saw them said they were ranting about vengeance and something about a Hanzo. His eyes had now virtually popped, as had Kakashi's, who required only the words Hanzo and vengeance together to fit the puzzle together. Wouldn't they be stupid enough? He asked the aged toad Sanine. I'm not sure, Sakura. Was this blue-haired girl with a dark-haired companion and another orange-haired boy? She shook her head when he said, if she was there, then they must be 2. He cursed. There was only one thing that could ever separate Konan from Yahiko and Nagato, death, and that would be to visit their old cabin in Amigakure. No, just the reports of the blonde-haired ninja that looked like Naruto. He also stated they wore black cloaks with blue flames and the words New Order on the back, a different variation to the 4th Hokage's apparently, she said. Naruto looked around. The gates looked just as they did all those years ago. The only difference to the village was Tsunade's face on the Hokage monument. This is the Leaf Village, whispered Konan. Naruto caught on to her fading voice immediately. Konan, I know what they did to you was wrong, but that was a different generation. There is no point in placing judgment upon those for the crimes of others, he said. She sighed. He always knew what to say. Yes, Pain-sama, she replied, calming down. They walked slowly towards the gates, the black piercings reflecting light off Naruto's face. Hey, what's your guy's business, her? Asked Kotetsu seriously. Naruto tossed a small look at Konan. She nodded. It was time to scare people. Naruto jumped forward quickly, causing multiple nearby Jounin to chase him, but not before Konan's paper clones stepped between them. We have an assault on the village, shouted Genma, suddenly appearing. Before he paused, looking at Naruto. Do not believe that. He never got it done because he leaped to avoid Konan's paper shuriken. With a chakra scalpel in hand, Shizen charged at Konan, who merely grabbed her arm and threw her away into Kotetsu. Naruto glanced around and felt recognizable chakras approaching them. He grumbled he had to use the jutsu already. He smacked the floor and slapped his hands together. Jutsu no Kuchios. Call. Two figures showed up, one had a feminine face and long black hair, while the other was wearing striped pants, carried a giant sword on his back, and had a cloth covering his face. The female lookalike remarked, "Pain-sama, it's been a while since you summoned us." Naruto gave a nod. "Haku, it's been a while, but now isn't the time to make memories. While Konan and I travel to the Hokage's tower, I need you and Zabuza to keep these Konoha at bay." After nodding, they joined Konan's paper clones. Both Konan and Naruto ran to the tower. As she sensed the two Sannin approaching, she said, "Pain-sama, there are 5 more chakra levels heading our way. One of them is definitely the Hokage, and the other is Jiraiya-sensei." Naruto halted on top of his former apartment building and nodded. "This is serious, Konan. We are up against 2 legendary Sannin, Sakura Haruno and Kakashi Hatake, both of whom are Sharingan wielders." She gave a brief nod. These were unquestionably possible threats if he wasn't referring to her moniker. 10 meters away, the chakra levels abruptly ceased. "You have no right to attack this village. This cannot be forgiven. You attempt to crush my ancestors' dream." Tsunade shouted, but she froze when she realized who it was. "Is that you and Naruto?" She stumbled. He raised his head, allowing them to see his figure. Everyone gaped at him in disbelief. "You monster!" Sakura screamed as she sprinted in his direction. Her arms extended as Konan moved ahead of her. "No one approaches Pain-sama without his consent." Pain-sama was Jiraiya's term for him, and her eyes widened. He retreated a few paces in shock. This child could not possibly be Pain of Kazekure, the tiny village that had appeared only a year before. Observing everything, Tsunade and Kakashi gazed at him. "What is it? Why is his name so significant?" Jiraiya swallowed. He, Tsunade, and Kakashi would probably be able to take him out with ease, but with Konan they would undoubtedly take a very long time. Kazekure, that new little village near Kirigakure, was supposedly founded by a shinobi named Pain after he killed most of the local criminals. It has one of the lowest crime rates in the 5 nations, and Pain has personally executed the majority of the criminals he caught. "He's like a hero among their people. It's Al-Dash." He was interrupted by Konan's shout. "Kindly direct Jiraiya-sensei to Naruto-senpai. He is God." Everyone just stared at her in shock as she screamed. She was essentially behaving like a monarch. Sakura declared, "There is no way Naruto Baka is Pain. He was too childish to be a ruler." Sasuke just gazed at the figure before him. That was undoubtedly Naruto, but why was he hiding his eyes and chakra? It wasn't what he recalled, and he was certain Kakashi was aware of it. Sakura was scowled at by Konan. Before Naruto put his hand on her shoulder, she snarled, "You little whore. I'll place judgment upon you for that." She would either assault Sakura or not, depending on what he said next. "Slow down, Kochan." With the final 2 words, she relaxed. Sakura was surprised to see Naruto's eyes as he passed her and stood in front of her. They had changed from their previous deep ocean blue to a mild purple with rings surrounding it. He pointed to Tsunade and said, "I came here not for the village, I came for her." Konan hurried over to him and said, "Naruto, you can't be serious. Don't the first 4 Kages, Zabuza, and Haku have enough power? You will exhaust your chakra." With concern, she cried. When Sasuke muttered, "That really is Naruto," Sakura shook her head. "No, no, no," she answered. "Naruto would never harm this village." Naruto abruptly vanished. What the dash? Jiraiya didn't finish his sentence because Naruto came up behind him and shoved him into a wall. As Naruto got to his feet, Kakashi and Sasuke both used their Sharingans. "Are you crazy, Naruto?" Sasuke shouted. Naruto extended two hands, palms facing Sasuke and Kakashi as though he had just snuck up on a Sannin as if it were normal. Which is more powerful? My Razengans or your Chidorus? Two blue spheres materialized as he directed his chakra into his palms. Are two one-handed Razengans forming simultaneously? Is that a young, deranged Minato or Naruto? Tsunade wondered. She was taken aback when Konan managed to cut her with her kunai. She cursed, I'm getting too damned old for this, but damn it, she surprised me. Konan smiled a little. A legendary Sannin had just been cut by her. You're supposed to be the strongest kunoichi in the world, sad woman, but I'm going to take that title away from you soon. With her face mended, Tsunade got to her feet. Her face twisted with uncontrollable anger. My little Gaki must be acting this way because of you. I'll make you pay. The ground was ripped apart beneath her as she yelled and slammed both of her hands into the ground, causing Konan to fall back. It would be a long day, and all she can hope for is that her two backup clones will complete their task. A clone said, hurry, we need all four bodies for Pain-sama's plan, while the other extracted the coffin belonging to the third. The other clone responded, I'm here as a lookout and to defend you against intruders, adding, we'd be done the old man if you helped out. Then shut it and let me work, the clone groaned. She executed several seals just to Kuchiosno. A tiny rhino showed up. It only matched her height. She fastened the casket to its rear. The lab of Kazgakure Shodame the rhino poofed. 3 more to go, 1 down. Both the Nidame and the Yondame sounded better. Both coffins dropped with a loud thud after she yanked them. The sound caused both clones to recoil. The first clone said, nice going now the guards know. She sped past the identical hand signals, ignoring her. Kuchios no Jutsu Bunshin. Now before her, 2 larger rhinos appeared. Together with the other clone, she lifted the second's coffin and secured it to the beast. They started with the fourth's coffin after it poofed away. They struggled a little when they picked it up and discovered it to be heavier than the previous 2. Damn, for such a hot guy, the man weighed a load, they exclaimed as they successfully perched it atop the rhino. A man emerged at the doorway as they started to tie it up. He inhaled his cigarette and rubbed his beard. He smiled as he produced 2 trench knives and said, well, grave robbers, and with the Lord Hokage's bodies no less, that's just not good. Now, how about you 2 beautiful women come quietly and drop the fourth's coffin? He grinned. After exchanging glances, one of them hurried over to Asuma as the other completed securing the coffin. Kakashi was no longer in the air. This gal couldn't really hold him, Sasuke, and Sakura motionless by herself. He turned to observe Jiraiya-sama and Lady Tsunade's performance against Pain. Naruto? Or was it Pain? In any case, he checked to see how they were fighting. They were at a standstill as well, but Pain was gradually losing the battle. Naruto, pay attention. What's happening? Why are you acting in this way? Loudly questioned Tsunade as he ducked behind one of Jiraiya's Katan jutsus. He was panting and gradually growing weary as he got up and wiped perspiration from his brow. How would he defeat Orochimaru and Hanzo, who essentially handed them their asses decades ago, when he couldn't even defeat these 2 in their old age? He replied, I will lead this world to that war, and with that they will all truly see the value of peace. Peace can only come through the understanding of people, Tsunade, and that understanding can only be born from the mutual connection or experience of 2 or more people. She let out a sharp intake of anguish. His fists and kicks had undoubtedly become more powerful, and Jiraiya was still unconscious from the last Rasengan he had blocked. Why? Aren't agony and anguish just what you're looking for? How can this be resolved by war? A small part of her wanted to know what had altered him so drastically, so she inquired. The fact that it wasn't the girl Konan was now clear. He retorted, the very pain I felt here in Konoha is what helped me see that truth. I suffered more pain than any child my age should have. By inflicting that pain on the world, they will grow stronger, and in that suffering I will convince them to help end that suffering. His response, what of everyone you cared about, made some sense to her. Irika, Shizen, Sakura, Jiraiya, and Kakashi? What about the others? Curious, she inquired, they can either join me or move aside, but the latter is pretty clear, isn't it? She nodded. He made a valid point, she said. Because most people didn't know what true hardship was like she and the others did. Perhaps he was right, perhaps his plans were better than others, but that meant Danzu's own plans were right because there was a lot of similarity even though Danzu only focused on Konoha, Pain, or Naruto. Although she was aware that what she was going to do would make her a traitor to Konoha and prevent her from ever entering this place again, she felt that it was worth it if it meant a better world. Maybe she would even get to see Dan and her younger brother soon. All right, I'll accompany you. He gave her a startled expression before he recovered. She accepted his outstretched hand and Konan quickly followed. Pain-sama, 3 of the Hokages have been captured by the clones, but they were stopped by an elite jounin before they could capture the final one. After nodding and taking both of their hands, Naruto closed his eyes and said, Kaze Kami no Jutsu. They swiftly vanished into thin air and Kakashi glanced about. Now half of the buildings had been demolished. Lady Tsunade, what should you do? He inquired. No answer. Did Pain succeed? No. Jiraiya-sama was rendered unconscious. He possesses the Hokage. He hurried to Jiraiya to alert him that if they were able to obtain information from Tsunade, Konoha would be in peril.